This time we'll look at what's under the upholstery leather. In an earlier video, we covered making the wood frame. This video covers from the jute webbing up to the muslin cover. A final video will cover the leather upholstery and the cambric dust cover. As always, you'll find the affiliate links for the products that we used for these layers down below in the description. I have my first chair frame in place here, and the first step is to add the jute to the frame. When I do this, I'm going to be starting off with some staples that are 9/16 of an inch or 14 millimeters long. That'll go, it's just a little bit more than half an inch, so a little bit better than halfway through my support here. When I attach the jute, I need to plan for front to back and side to side. This is a 3.5 inch wide roll, so it's quite a bit of the thickness or the distance that I have here. Okay, so I've got my center marked here on the back. That one's pretty easy to eyeball where this should come between those two marks. But on the front, I've got 3 spaces. I've got 2 pieces coming forward, so I have 3 spaces that I'll divide up fairly evenly. Generally, you don't want more than about an inch to fall between your jute. I'll have a little bit more, but that's okay because it's going to be taut. I'm going to have some other things that support. So the distance across the front is 12 3/4 of an inch. So that gives me a gap left over, a total gap space to fill of 6 1/8 inches divided by 3 spaces, roughly 2 inches apiece. I'm going to edge those a little bit closer to the outside, so I'm going to put the outside edges right at 1 7/8 and 1 7/8. That'll give me a center gap when I put the jute on of roughly just under 2 inches, which is perfect. Now to put the jute on, to begin with, I'm going to start in the back because it's easier to stretch it forward and I'll turn it around. Also, this is where it's going to go evenly. So this one, I'll staple it in from the inside. I'll be folding this over the top and stapling that again. That helps tack that a little bit better. I want my staples to go in line with the wood, not this direction, because that'll cause a cut in the jute and allow it to pull out. I do have to push down pretty hard with this because it just doesn't want to go in. Okay. I'll tap this high one down with a hammer. The next step is to fold this over the top. These are going to come closer to the outside edge. If I had stapled these first ones on this outer edge, it'd be kind of weird when it folds back. This is going to come this direction, so I want to make sure it's lined up a little bit off center like that, right about to there. Plenty of staples is always a good thing. When I go to tighten this up, I'll be using my stretcher. This has a mark on it that says work side. It's the one with the groove in it. This piece is going to just tuck in there. So the jute, I just make a loop, stick it in through the back, and put my rod in between. It's that simple of a tool. This way when I pull, if I were to just try and stretch this by hand, that's about as tight as I get it. And that's quite a bit of stretch and bounce to it. And you'll see I can get quite a bit more. This groove is going to go along the bottom edge here, and then I'll help pull it tight. And that piece in the back keeps it from slipping out when I have it all the way inserted. There we go. And you can see when I pull it tight, I'm going to grab on up here with a handle so that it doesn't slip on me. Put the edge of it against my piece, and I'll pull that as tight as I possibly can, allowing it to roll through as it needs to. And that's about where it's going to go. Line it up with my marks, and that's where I'll tack it in place. Set it up so I can get a nice tight pull on it. And there we go. That's what I want. So when I fold this over the top, I can staple here, 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 and here for a nice, good fit. Nice and tight. Then the top of this will fold over this way. By having it doubled over and stapled twice, it gives it a more of a strength to the jute, so it's not going to come apart. I'll just cut that straight across and staple it down. Again, I want it here and here and in the centers. Don't want to feel any of those staples. I'll continue the same thing on this side, and then I'll weave strips across on the other side. And once again, I'm going to have only 2 going across because 3 pieces, I can get 3. I'll put 3 across here and 2 across this direction, and that'll be for my seat base. Now when I put the next strips in, I'm going to want to weave it under to begin with. I do have 3 strips that are going to go straight across. Like I said, that's really tight. It's almost too close, so I'm going to just go with the 2. And I'll have to divide that space up again like I did before. I want to weave these through, and this is going to get tipped over. I want to weave it first though, because I need to be able to get my piece in without, or weave it through without having to cut it off first. Right across, so it's pretty easy to see what I'm doing. I'm going to let the inside come to the edge like that, so that when I fold this over, it's going to be straight across. So perpendicular to my sides. I'm trying not to get too much on the angled over part, because you might actually feel that, but this is towards the back of the seat. And again, I'll have to stretch this across. I have my mark right here on the edge. Get it nice and tight. I'm going to have to clamp it again because otherwise it'll flip on me. This jute is a little wider than what I like to use, but I also wanted to make sure I had the red jute. That's important. It's a stronger jute. Stretch it as much as I possibly can. And on the second one, because this one's over on this and under on this, I want it to be over the top of this one, but under the other one, so it's a weave, like so. If I angle this a little bit at my 10 degrees, it'll give me an edge that's folded over. That'll be better. I just need to figure out where that needs to come, roughly. This is going to come straight across to here. So this is my angle. Again, this is as tight as I can possibly pull it by hand. You'll notice that these marks come quite a ways over once I put the stretcher on. So you really don't want to be stretching it by hand and without the use of a tool. Okay. I usually put the one that's being stressed the most with 5. And that's the webbing. Nice and tight. That's the kind of sound you want to hear when it's stretched properly. The second layer is the burlap fiber that's going to go on top of the jute. That'll keep my stuffing in place. I want that to be about the same width as my chair frame. I'll be folding the edges under. So I can just draw an outline of where to cut. I have the bottom edge lined up, and I'll cut that out. I've already got my comfortable jute to sit on. This will just lie on top. The edges will just get folded under and tacked into place. I want to put one in the center of each one, and you can remember I have this gap here, so the center is pretty easy to find. And keeping it lined up top to bottom, just take that center piece and keep it fairly taut but not overly stretched. It's going to be supported completely by the jute underneath. This just gives us neat edges. And go to the top and the bottom. Again, you want to make sure you're not pulling it too hard either direction. You want to get that pretty much centered. So this one, keep it centered top to bottom. Just fold the first one under, and that gets rid of all those rough edges for us. Keeps them inside of our upholstery work. And on the other side, and this one I can make sure I have a little bit more snug. It's already in place. Just enough to keep it tight. You don't want to stretch it overly much. Then I'll continue with the other edges and around the frame to tack that into place. The next step is the 1/2 inch thick foam. It's high density foam. And I've got my pattern, which is taken just by laying the frame on top of the foam, draw around it with a Sharpie. I'll cut that out, and that'll lie directly on top of my seat frame. And I'm going to cut the corners out because I don't want the extra bulk of the foam to be in those corners where I have to go around the legs. The next layer, it's going to be 1 inch medium density foam. It's going to be cut to the same shape as the high density foam, which is my seat frame. So I can do the same thing with this and simply lay this on top and cut that out to the shape that I need. This layer I'm going to be using a bit of spray adhesive to stick that together with my high density foam. That way they won't shift out of place on each other. They're going to be stuck firmly together. The next layer is the cotton batting. This is going to be a little bit larger than the frame. It's going to actually wrap around the sides and to the back a little bit. I'm going to trim that up a little bit afterwards. It's going to hold all of my foam in place on top, so it's actually got to stretch down over the top of this as well. So it's got a bit of a distance to go. You want to leave a good extra inch or so around it, maybe a generous inch. And I'll just cut that with the frame in place to a general size. Doesn't need to be neat. And then on top of the cotton batting comes the next layer of the cotton muslin. And that's also going to be about a little bit bigger than what you really need. Plus you want about another 4 inches or so to be able to pull it as you tack it into place on the back side. And what the batting does is, in addition to giving a little bit of loft, it's going to allow the muslin to slip against it, being pulled nicely without having to stick against the foam. So even though there's a wrinkle there, I think I'm going to put that down just because it'll smooth a little bit better. These corners will get pulled down into the seat frame. So this is going to have to be wider than what I need also. So I'm allowing 4 inches on each side, roughly. So out to about here. I'm going to cut this at the angle that kind of matches along with that side if I was to measure it. I want it to be about, again, this is not an exact thing because on the back side it's going to be folded under anyway. So on my chair, seat frame, I have the jute the burlap, 2 layers of foam, then the cotton batting. Next is going to come the muslin. I'll just take this whole thing, set it upside down, and make sure everything is lined up the way I want it. And the trick here is that when I pull this up along the sides, it's going to pull everything together with a nice curved over edge at the front. The foam will be pulled against the framing right here. It's got the gap, so that'll have a nice edge to it as well. I want to start with the front, pulling it up and in the center. Again, with the fabric, so I'm not cutting anything. And then on the opposite side, I want this to be really snug. I want my cotton bat to be pulled over the edge. I want it nice and straight. So it's also a good idea to go for the centers. This one I've gotten right in the center. I have my center marked here, so I'll know right where I'm going with all of this. Because if I got it skewed in this whole process, it'd be really a messy front. Then ones in each of the sides. This enables us to keep things from getting off kilter. And here I can just line up with my grain and know where the fabric weave. Pull that up along the side and around. So you can see right now it's rather pulled in at these points. So as I go along, I'm going to be pulling this out to the corners to keep that a nice smooth connecting surface without the puckers. So you grab corner in, pull it up, and ensure that the fabric is where you need it, and work your way from the inside to the outside, keeping everything flat. You want to leave about 3 inches or so on the end here because it's going to be folded over differently. You can see how it's evened that out a bit. Do the same thing all the way around. I'm going to show you how we do the corner where we have the back leg cut out. Most corners on the seats that you're going to encounter are going to be a simple rounded over corner. This one's inside corner, and those are a little bit harder to do. What we're going to do is staple everything down up to the diagonal along here. And then we do the same thing on the other corner. We'll staple up to this diagonal from this corner to this corner. Without catching the other fabric. The next thing we want to do is we're going to make kind of a dog ear out of this. And if you see that we fold this up in and pull it tight, we've got extra fabric here. This fabric gets folded to the inside of the dog ear on each side evenly. It's a little bit of a trick. Kind of make sure you have it pulled up in the center and fold it to the inside. Then you'll pull those as soon as I get this one around the corner. Find the place where that's going to pull fairly evenly and tack that into place. It doesn't matter on the back side that you have a couple of wrinkles here. Our desire is to get it to lie this corner on the front. Each side has a little bit of a fold over. Actually, this is the back of the chair. Each side has a little bit of a fold over towards the center with the dog ear on the back. And these staples are a little bit shallower so that I don't go all the way through to the front side. All of this is going to be held in place further with the staples from the leather. I can cut us some of the excess. In our next video on upholstery, I'll cover choosing and using leather as the outer upholstery layer and adding the final cambric dust cover.